Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It's your girl Alana here. Welcome back to 3 Degrees of Love Divination. So I wanted to, this is a very sort of impromptu live today that I felt called to do. And I wanted to share it with all of you. So, welcome and thank you for being here. For those of you that will be watching the playback, thank you. So just gonna wait a few minutes just to see if anyone shows up in chat. But in the meantime, I want to sort of just give a basic overview on what I had hoped to discuss in this live chat today. So, what I hope to discuss and with all of you is the various ways in which we communicate, and especially when it comes to emotional intelligence when we're in a leadership role, and how, to me, that is very important when we're interacting with one another, when we are engaging in community, when we are relaying messages, to one another for learning, for integration, for development, right? All of those things. So one of the things that I had been thinking about, and that has sort of been coming up for me in the last in my thought process in the last little while, especially considering that we're now in the new moon in Virgo, and and the idea of a Virgo season, and sort of being grounded and really being in tune with Mother Nature, with Earth, right, with one another. And the things that were coming up for me were the words integrity, empathy, and of course emotional intelligence, which is why this sort of came up for me. And even just in some sort of, I guess, as I've been reviewing various people within various communities, talking about love and light and spirituality and integration and all of those things, right? And one of the things that also I found sort of coming up was the idea of vibration and frequency. And I think I did sort of discuss this in a previous video that I did on my Spiritual Void channel. I don't remember which episode we were talking about that. Could have been the last one, which we were talking about linguistics. Excuse me, with my co-host Hilda from Nova Scotia's Organic to the Land Stories, and also Ravneet of Winds of Reflection. But understanding that vibration and frequency, what I've found even in the spiritual community is that a lot of the times there's a little bit of the confusion between, when I say confusion, I mean the idea that they're used interchangeably, but really and truly, they're actually separate. They're very related, but the way that it's used is not quite accurate. And so, of course, the way that my brain works and wanting to, deep dive into things and learn more about it and stuff like that, I started uncovering some things about, the idea of frequency and vibration. And so one of the things that also was that came up was the idea of how the words integrity, empathy, and emotional intelligence sort of falls in with that, with our vibrations and frequency, and how we can, the various ways in which we can sometimes lose ourselves in the lower vibrations of all three of those areas, if you will. So to me, when I look at and understanding um, leadership and emotional intelligence and things like that, the one thing that really comes up is the idea of our communication, how we communicate with one another and how we communicate with ourselves, and the words that we speak, and how that ultimately sort of influences our vibrational level and ultimately our frequency. And so when it comes to being high vibrational, the things that sort of come up for me that I've as I've been doing my research and things like that, and reflecting, is the fact that when we're operating from a high vibrational, sort of high frequency level, um, our communication style, the way we talk to ourselves, the way we talk to one another, we are speaking truthfully, we are speaking kindly, we are learning and knowing how to say no when needed. We are also owning our mistakes and keeping our promises. To me, that's integrity. Um, when it comes to the low vibration of integrity, what I've come to sort of reflect on and recognize is lying. Even small white lies can be considered low vibrational. But I wouldn't say that ultimately it's something that would completely lower our frequency. However, of course, the more that we do these things, right? Um, the other thing would be sugarcoating to avoid conflict, speaking from fear, um, instead of authenticity. And I know that a lot of the times we can often do that, especially when it comes to, depending on what um, our trauma response might have been, what whether we depending on which category of trauma response we fell in. So flight, fight, freeze, or fawn, right? And so with when we're speaking from a level of fear and not authenticity, um, right, that can look like aggression. Um, that can also look like people pleasing, because we are either we're fighting against someone, we're becoming very defensive, um, or we are giving into the other person and their wants and desires without keeping space for our own. And so that's where the idea of the fear and not speaking from authenticity comes from. Each time we betray our truth in our words, our vibration dips. If the body feels unsafe, it's because we know we're out of alignment with ourselves. And yes, I have all this stuff written down, so please bear with me. When it comes to empathy and communication, when we're operating from a high frequency, high vibrational place, we are listening deeply, we're reflecting back on what we hear, we are validating others and their feelings while holding our own boundaries for our own feelings. From a low vibrational sort of perspective, when it comes to empathy and communication, one of the things that I've come to realize when reflecting, things like interrupting when someone else is speaking or being interrupted by someone, dismissing or invalidating others, invalidating our feelings, or over merging, so taking on someone else's feelings as if it's your own. And that's where we can, again, lose ourselves, because there's no differentiation between myself and the other person. When it the impact on our vibration sort of rises when we learn how to hold space for others without losing our own center. It lowers when the communication is draining. Because we end up confusing compassion with self-sacrifice. Now, when it comes to emotional intelligence, and that's the level of understanding and being able to see past our own perspective. We can this is sort of where I think where the idea of neurodivergence and neurotypical tend to sort of fall in. And I feel like when we're not on the same wavelength, and I don't necessarily mean that in vibration or frequency, even in our communication styles, right? So, excuse me. I talk a lot about the fact that I am neurodivergent and living in a society that is built for neurotypical. And the more that I research and understand the differences between neurodivergence and neurotypical has to do with how we sort of process information. And when it comes to emotional intelligence and sort of communicating with various individuals, when we're operating from a higher frequency, we are learning how to pause before reacting. We are naming our feelings very clearly instead of attacking or shutting down. And I know that as a neurodivergent person, oftentimes that can be a struggle, because when we feel very misunderstood, which is a lot of the time, it it's easy for us to either lash out or shut down. And I know that I have been on many occasions sort of been find myself in the latter, where shutting down has sort of become the go-to, if you will, because it's hard to to sort of navigate and communicate with others when you don't feel heard, you don't feel seen. Sort of low vibrational version of emotional intelligence comes when we are blaming, when we are projecting or using harsh tones or suppressing our emotions until they end up bursting, if you will. When it comes to the impact that emotional intelligence has on raising our vibration, it's about creating clarity, creating safety for ourselves and others. It helps to allow the flow of authenticity and love to flow freely. When without it, often we run into aspects of miscommunication, there's tension, and it lowers the energy for everyone involved. When it comes to the vibration exchange that we have with one another, every word, every tone, every silence carries a frequency. And I think when in a previous conversation, I had spoken about the idea of things being linear. So our frequency, we can be high frequency, but within that frequency, we can still vibrate, right? And fluctuate with high and low vibrations, high and low interactions and choices and things like that, right? That the whole idea of depression and anxiety and those things. To me, high vibrational communication is honest, it's compassionate, and it's regulated. It strengthens integrity, empathy, and our emotional intelligence simultaneously. When we are communicating from a very sort of low vibrational space, we are being dishonest to ourselves, we're being dishonest to each other, we are being reactive and lack boundaries. And as that happens, it can erode all areas over time, bringing us down to a lower frequency. And I feel like that's kind of where society seems to be at right now, more in the lower vibrations and the lower frequencies of life. And one of the things that I guess I've realized that I have come to to a conclusion for myself is that in order for there to be change, in order for us to grow and lead with integrity and with authenticity, this is something that we have to work on, but from an individual level, healing the parts of ourselves that do not align with the higher vibrational, higher frequency energies. Remembering that the body itself keeps score. And it holds on to the trauma, to the triggers. So that's kind of why I sort of wanted to sort of do this today, because I find that one of the things that I sort of realize about myself, especially, is that we have our various emotions, right? And I've recognized for myself that a lot of my emotions sort of reside on the surface of me. So things like happiness and sadness and even maybe fear can often appear more easily than maybe some other emotions. One of those other emotions that I realized that does not necessarily sit on the surface, and it takes a lot to bring it out, is anger. Now, I think it depends on, and maybe that's also why I realized that I physically have also encountered a lot of issues with my everyday living, because the anger sort of presents itself in a different way. It doesn't present itself in the traditional sense, like I would say maybe for most people. For me, my anger comes out in my OCD. It comes out with gut issues. It comes out through sadness. It doesn't come out, like I said, in the traditional sense. And I think partly because I've been on the opposite side of other people's anger, and it's not a nice feeling. And I also find that for me, when the anger comes out, it's exhausting. So it kind of sort of, I find it a little confusing for me when I see how with other people their anger just comes out naturally, like very easily. But I also see what I find is that when that happens, it leaves, what's the word I'm looking for? It leaves an opening for lower or darker energies to rise and to come in. Having anger is also healthy. That's how we are able to communicate and say the things that we don't like, to say the things that bother us. But it's how we choose to do it. We can display our anger without it being disruptive. It's how we choose to express it that makes all the difference. So I one of the reasons why I think even when it comes to understanding the laws of karma, especially from from a higher vibrational, higher frequency sort of perspective, understanding the way that sort of karma works and the choices we make when it comes to how we communicate our differences with one another. Everything, especially especially coming to the understanding that we're all different. You have people who are neurodivergent, you have people who are neurotypical, and often neurotypical and neurodivergents can't necessarily understand one another, because the neurodivergent, their mind is a little bit more attuned to various dimensions. The way we process information often comes in from multiple dimensions. So we don't necessarily fit that sort of cookie cutter box of everyday sort of functioning. And so when it comes to having disagreements, remember, everything is up to our own perspective and interpretations. So something that somebody does may not align or feel good for you, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. But when we take that and interpret it as being bad, and then we process that, and then our thoughts and our emotions, the way that we sort of process that information, we then latch on to, well, that person meant something negative towards me, or they meant something bad towards me. So we send back we send back that sort of same negative energy, because we think what we're receiving is negative, when it may not be. It just may appear that way to us. So this is why, when it comes to the law of karma, and why, when I talk about, not sending ill intentions that may have come towards you and sending them back, I prefer to transmute that and send that back to the divine. Because to me, that just sort of flips back and forth, sort of flip-flopping the law of karma. And when does the idea of two wrongs don't make a right, right? When does that energy get transmuted? To me, it doesn't. It just bounces back and forth. And ultimately, that interaction is what I feel really impacts our vibrations and our frequencies. So that's why I feel like it's also very important that when we are especially when we're in a leadership role, when we are, building a sense of community, and we are, sort of collaborating with one another, these things are very important to think about, because ultimately it shapes the future decisions, the future interactions that we may have. And so, yeah. So yeah, like that's really what I really wanted to sort of discuss, and what, has really sort of been coming up for me, and what I've been thinking about, and reflecting on, and then wanting to share that with all of you. So I hope that this information is received well, obviously you take what applies, and hopefully that you'll reflect upon it and share with me your thoughts. What what are some of the things that you agree with? What are maybe additional things that you've thought of when it comes to this topic? And what does leadership that is high vibrational, that is of high emotional intelligence and integrity, looks like for you? So, with all that being said, I want to thank you for joining me for this very first solo live stream today. I hope to be doing more of them, and yeah, and sort of getting over this fear I have of talking live, speaking, if you will. It's different when you are by yourself versus when you are interacting with others, having conversations with other people, which I often like to do. I love, to collab and, have that sort of back and forth discussion when it comes to things, and just overall connecting, building a sense of community with like-minded individuals, people who want to see the vibration of, the collective, to be higher than what it currently is. It's I realize that as a sensitive person, as an empath, um, I guess I'm impacted by what I see, what I notice around me, and maybe than more than I would like. So, and still sort of trying to manage all of that. So, if you like my discussion, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for joining me today. And I hope to talk to you all again. So until then, know that I am love, and so are you. As I see myself as human, I know you are too. And so, with all that being said, please remember to take care of yourselves and one another. And while you're at it, don't forget about me too. Please like, share, and subscribe. Hit that notification bell so you'll always be in the know when I post my next video. Please check out the other videos that I currently have on my channel, and comment down below and tell me what you think. Yeah, I would love to keep this conversation going, and yeah, so until then, please remember to check your privilege, mind your magic, and as always, live, listen, and learn. I love you, everybody. Thank you so much. Bye.